welcome to the panel to talk about Starknet L3s and gaming. And here we have the chads of Starknet. Maybe we can go through introducing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I'm Abdel, working at StarkWare as head of ecosystem.
Hey, I'm Tarrence. I'm one of the co-founders of Cartridge and core contributors to Dojo. And we've been building layer 3s in the Starknet ecosystem for almost 2 years now. And have been focused on building layer 3s on top of Starknet.
So for me, I'm Danilo. I'm co-founder and ecosystem lead at Kakarot. So for the questions, I think the first one is, Abdel, could you share a little bit about how was the journey from idealizing Madara? Because in the beginning it was, okay, we're going to be a sequencer. Now it's becoming a full framework for L3s. I remember you sharing the idea on, I think it was in Israel, on the bar after the events, and it's crazy how far it came from there.
Yeah, sure. So initially, the idea was to try to build a fully fledged sequencer that will be capable of being decentralized using a proof-of-stake consensus mechanism. And instead of building something from scratch, the idea was to use an existing blockchain framework. So we had mainly the choice between either the Cosmos SDK or Substrate. And mostly because the Starknet ecosystem is heavily Rust-based. So that was an important decision criteria for us to choose Substrate. Also, we felt that it was more flexible and more modular. So then we implemented a proof of concept to evaluate if it was possible to actually build a Starknet sequencer using a Substrate stack. And also it was a good opportunity to also bring some developers from Polkadot ecosystem and Substrate ecosystem in general, because you can use Substrate for non-Polkadot related chains. And it worked pretty well, actually. We were able to onboard a lot of Substrate builders. And at some point we realized that this flexibility and level of customization that we could have with Substrate was something that would be very cool for Starknet app chains, because one of the purpose of app chains is to be able to be flexible and innovate faster than the public network itself. So it's a good way to innovate and bring some custom features that can also be some sort of canary network for the public Starknet itself, because you can try different stuff and then you can apply stuff that work well to the public Starknet later and so on. And now, we try to build a generic framework that will be able to let people build their own app chains with custom features and decentralization, custom fee token and whatnot. But yeah.
Interesting. And this question is for Tarrence. So when Madara started, why did you guys choose to build Katana instead of adapting it?
Yeah, so I mean, we were actually involved in the Madara project quite early on. Cartridge was one of the first operators of was it Rinnegan? The first testnet. With Katana, we really, one of the things that I think is that ZK fundamentally changes how a blockchain, a lot of the assumptions that we make about how a blockchain operates around block production and transaction confirmation and stuff like that, it gives us a lot more flexibility to explore new architectures. And Katana was really one of the design goals of it was to be super simple. And so Madara is a really incredible project, and Substrate is a great platform to build on top of, but embedded in it is a bunch of assumptions about what a blockchain should look like how a transaction, how a mempool should look, and how blocks are produced, and and how upgrades are done, for example. Katana is very simple, and a lot of what we're doing is trying to explore a different point in the solution space around how can we enable new affordances on top of Starknet, rather than producing just another blockchain on top of Starknet, which I think has interesting use cases. Can we produce something fundamentally different? Particularly for the gaming use case and what we're trying to enable with autonomous worlds and fully on-chain games.
Interesting. Yeah, I think they're very good complementary for some specific applications need more Madara, some use Katana. I think this question is for both of you guys. How do you see the L3 space evolving in Starknet? What are, like, where we will be in, or where you expect for us to be in the next year?
I can go first.
Yeah, go for it.
So I think, yes, that first of all, maybe we can discuss about the benefits of layer 3s actually first. One of them is, of course, hyperscaling, because you can have another order of magnitude of scaling, and also you can verify proofs in a way cheaper manner on Starknet, because Starknet is optimized to verify proofs. But beside that, the most exciting part for me is the flexibility and being able to build some custom features, because it's really, you can have your full sovereignty as a project, as an app chain, because you won't depend on the roadmap of the public Starknet, and you will be able to bring more features and whatnot. So I would like to see a lot of those app chains in different verticals. Like we said, like gaming is one of them. And I think that, yeah, Katana, for example, is great for that, this kind of app chains. I also want to see, I think, like, for example, in DeFi, there are some use cases that are very suitable for app chains, like when it comes to regulation or stuff like that, or if you want to have some privacy that we don't have right now on the public Starknet. So privacy, I think, is one very important use case that will be enabled by app chains before it will be enabled on the public Starknet. Of course, it will come with some challenges, but maybe we'll talk about those later. But yeah, generally, I'm very excited about the custom features that we can see on app chains, and also see which ones will be usable then for the public Starknet. Like, again, I really see also those app chains as a canary network for innovation. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll speak a little bit more directly to, like, the kind of the roadmap that we're pursuing with Dojo and Slot, which is our roll-up as a service that we're operating on top of the Starknet ecosystem. I think, like, there's going to be a tremendous amount of progress this year. I think, like, this idea of layer 3s is going to evolve significantly. There's this idea of persistent layer 3s, which, you know, is how people currently, I think, reason about it. It's like, okay, it's like Starknet, or it's like Optimism, or it's like Arbitrum, but it's like, you know, for my app on top of this chain, and it just lives there. It's just like another place to go. With the architecture that we're operating with Katana, I think you'll see roll-up spun up ephemerally, as common as playing a game of, for example, Loot Survivor. And there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of instances of these in the next year. And it's not going to look like something that you see today, where you go into Argent and you set like an RPC provider, for example, for this particular chain. It's going to look much more like the traditional architecture of cloud infrastructure, where you don't necessarily know which, like, service provider your requests are being routed to. It's like all transparent to the user, but given, like, the affordances of zero-knowledge proofs, it's fully verified. You don't have to necessarily trust that the operator is executing according to, like, the logic that's implemented in the smart contracts. You can just take advantage of the fact that you have, like, incredibly cheap fees. And I think, like, we're going to see very ambitious, complex, and immersive experiences built on, you know, the framework that we're building with Katana and Dojo, where we're working to enable, like, significantly more state during the execution context of one of these, like, execution shards on top of Starknet. So I think you'll see a whole class of new types of games that weren't possible before because of the limitations of the data availability costs that even something like Starknet faces today, even with 4844, with kind of the approach that we're going. And I think it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, so for a new developer, when nowadays he has a lot of options for app chains, he has OP-Stack, now that's Polygon CDK, and now Madara and Katana. What are the benefits, and why should he choose Madara or Katana?
Okay. So I think that, for example, the OP-Stack is a terrible choice for layer 3s. Even if they had fraud proofs, which is not even the case for the layer 2, but even with that, it's important to be aware that the fraud-proof models involve some economic security aspects. So you can argue that those assumptions are fine on a network that is handling a lot of economic value, because you will have incentives for people to monitor the network and submit fraud proofs. But for an app chain, it can be very catastrophic to use an optimistic rollup-based framework, because if the app chain is not securing a lot of value, there is very little incentive for people to monitor it, so it can be very catastrophic in terms of security. So I would say that, to me, it's almost a no-brainer that optimistic rollup frameworks are very bad for layer 3s. So yes, I will disqualify them for sure because of security reasons, and also because you have this exponential delay with the dispute period if you have a layer 3s that will also have the dispute period delay of the layer 2 and layer 1. So it can be really hard to reason in terms of finality. What is the actual finality in those models? So for layer 3s, yes, I would say that optimistic rollup-based framework are very bad. And now when it comes to choose between validity rollups-based framework, I would say that for heavy computation, Cairo will always be the best because we don't have the overhead of the EVM, and there will be a lot of future improvements that will make Cairo even more optimized for heavy computation. So ultimately, I don't think that there is a silver bullet, and it depends on each case. But for example, for gaming, like for the gaming vertical, I think that Cairo is very well suited, because especially if you want to go with like real on-chain game and not just assets. If you want real on-chain logic, Cairo is very well suited, and then the Starknet stack becomes the best choice.
I wanted to follow up on the term for optimistic rollups. If the application doesn't need that much security, like let's say it's a social app or like a game that just it doesn't have monetary value, would you still disqualify them in that case?
It's a good question, but what is the limit? Because then at some point you can say, why even a blockchain solution? Like, why not just a centralized server? Yeah. But it's a good question. Yeah,
I definitely agree with what Abdel said. I think like the current approach in the ecosystem to spin up optimistic rollups and kind of hand wave away, like Abdel mentioned, like optimistic rollups make this like a security assumption that there's someone doing re-execution to make sure that the sequencer is being honest, right? And as you like shard the execution context into smaller and smaller execution context, you significantly reduce that security assumption, and it's very hard to reason about things. So people have just decided like not to reason about it. But I think like you fundamentally don't have to worry about that with ZK rollups. I think another thing that's interesting to mention is the state diffs that are possible with ZK rollups for high throughput applications that can significantly reduce the settlement costs of them, and so you enable like applications to settle to like the hardest data availability solution like Ethereum. Like what you see a lot of in the optimistic rollup ecosystem is a lot of teams making compromises around the data availability solutions that they're using, right? Like because for an optimistic rollup, you have to post transaction call data for every single transaction. So you need to have every single like input for every intermediate state of the rollup posted to like the data availability layer. And it doesn't scale very well. So a lot of them are saying, like let's use an alternative data availability layer like Celestia, for example. And the security model for an alternative data availability layer for an optimistic rollup is actually really bad. Like you inherit the security of the data availability layer's bridge, and the failure mode is basically that they can steal everything. It's like a sidechain bridge. It's actually exactly the same security model. With ZK, with Volition and alternative data availability, even though you have this ability to put like more state on chain and take advantage of harder, like due to the like temporal state compression that's enabled, like take advantage of harder data availability solutions like Ethereum. Even if you decided to use an alternative data availability solution like Celestia or Volition, the security model, the failure mode is much better, right? Essentially, you can't force an invalid state transition. You can essentially like extort like the chain. You can say like, look, we're just not gonna move the state forward unless you pay us X amount of dollars, which is significantly better than just being able to steal everything, obviously. And so I think ZK is just a much better paradigm for like this fractal scaling architecture of like thousands of rollups. And then I agree with amongst ZK rollups, like the Kairos stack is just, I mean, is particularly for what we're building with, enables so many interesting things, right? Like ZK EVMs are great if you have like a beefy server in AWS or whatever that is just doing the proving. But as soon as you want to do, for example, like client-side proving, it's impossible to do client-side proving of like a ZK EVM. It takes way too many resources and it's way too slow. But with Cairo, it's actually possible. And Cairo versus some of the other provable approaches like RISC-0 and SP1 is like, even in that case, is like maybe order of magnitude, if not more, efficient at proving. And I think eventually, especially in the case of complex applications like games, that overhead will be reflected in the types of experiences that people can ship on chain.
Yeah.
I think this next question is for Tarrence. In games, we have a lot of parallel execution and thousands of TPS. Do you think we'll ever get there? Or do you think there will always be a gap between decentralized applications and what you can do like when you're fully centralized?
I think that games like fundamentally have engineered around this. Like if you think about a lot of gaming experiences, like you're almost never, like the requirement from DeFi is that you have this like global execution context, right? You want the entire world to be executing against the same price on like an AMM, for example. With games, this is never the case. Like almost all games have like regional servers, so you're playing in US West or whatever because you want low latency. And then even if within a game, like most games, you're playing with a few other players. There's very few, like even like large like battle royale type games, like Fortnite or something is like 100 players in a concurrent session. You're not like thousands or scaling to millions. You're creating like a lot of these sessions. I think like games like Fortnite obviously will require a lot of transactions if you're trying to put like every bullet on chain, for example. And I'm not sure if that, like when that will be feasible, but there's a lot of games that fit well into the constraints of the blockchain today, especially if you consider the fact that you can do like execution sharding. So for example, like a game like World of Warcraft could very easily be fully on chain today. Like almost all of the experiences inside of World of Warcraft, you have like the main cities that are like a global execution context, which is very similar to like the throughput required for, just like a DeFi rollup today. And then you have like where people are actually doing like high frequency interactions with the world is like a dungeon run. And typically those are like, 5, 20, 50 participants in them. And that like inside of a single execution shard could easily be sequenced, right? Like, you don't need more than 1,000 transactions per second in order to sequence that. So I think like we're very close to being able to put a lot of the games that people enjoy in the traditional gaming space fully on chain.
Do you think that putting games that people already enjoy off chain on chain will be the differentiation, or it would be like we will need something that doesn't exist off chain for the on chain gaming narrative really take off?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of the games that will be successful on-chain will look very similar to off-chain games from a game mechanic perspective. I think the thing that like traditional games can't get that the blockchain gives you is like removing the platform risk that's associated with it. Like in almost all games today, there's some incentive misalignment between the publisher of the game and the players of the game. And players are always aware of this, that like the efforts and the resources that they put into these like digital universes at any point in time could be like diluted by the publisher, or the publisher could like, for example, just turn off the servers. Or they could release an expansion pack, right, that keeps like takes your achievements and diminishes them. And we've already seen this in the on-chain gaming ecosystem with like, for example, with Realms and Loot Survivors. People are much more attached to these universes because they have a more sincere relationship with them. They're willing to put in a lot more time and resources into them because they have like stronger guarantees of like the underlying affordances or like the ability of these protocols to change. Like they can, it's very legible, right? They can understand like how decisions are made and they can participate in those, and they can be reasonably ensured that like the development of the ecosystem is well aligned with all other stakeholders in the ecosystem. So I think like that is, in my opinion, like the most interesting fundamental affordance that like putting a game fully on chain enables, like a game to live forever and not be able to like be modified by things that aren't encoded in the on-chain logic of them. And even if you take like a traditional game and you put the exact same game on chain, it has the ability to be like a more competitive product offering to the end users.
Interesting. Yeah, I think this next question comes to Abdel, which is aligned with what we were discussing here. With ad chains, like one of the interesting things for Web3 is that everything is connected, interoperability and composability. With ad chains, we are gaining on TPS, but we are losing in this side. Do you see this as a problem? And if so, like, how does Starknet is looking towards that on the mid-longer run?
Yes, I definitely think it can be a problem, but probably not for gaming, actually. As Tarrence said before, you don't require to have this global common state, usually between different games. So I think this fragmentation won't be a real issue for games, because if there is some composability, actually, I think it can be more composability in terms of assets that those games are using, and you don't even have to move the assets. For example, you could have some games as layer 3s that will use assets on the layer 2 without moving them, for example, using storage proofs or stuff like that. So I think you can still have composability of those assets. But in terms of the logic of the game, you don't require this composability, especially like Tarrence said, you can imagine a world with ephemeral app chains even for one game. And in this scenario, you don't need to have a global shared state. But for DeFi applications, yes, I think it's a problem, and it can lead to some fragmentation of liquidity, stuff like that, some lack of interoperability. So this needs to be solved, and we can see many players in the industries trying to already solve this. For Starknet, we haven't settled on one direction yet. We all feel that there are some primitives that will help to solve that, like storage proofs. Again, we all feel that this will be something that will help to solve this problem. It's not clear yet how we can do that, but using storage proofs and a unified proving system that is very optimized, we can, I think, in the future solve this problem properly for app chains that will still have some kind of composability, because they will use the same proving system, and they will be able to trustlessly verify what happens on another app chain and stuff like that. And once we have sufficiently low finality, I think there will be some use cases that won't be problematic anymore, even with this fragmentation with app chains.
So soon we will see like some Kakarot SDK EVM being composable with Madara SDK, and
yes. Exactly.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah. The next question is for Tarrence. So you mentioned that there's a lot of benefits of owning the assets, and a lot of benefits that the blockchain brings to gaming. But I guess we still haven't seen any killer games yet. What do you think it's missing? Is it still the TPS? Is it still the throughput? Or are we already ready to have that killer game? What do you think is the bottleneck?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting closer. I think from a technological perspective, we're like, in the next year for sure. Like, I think even in the next 6 months, we'll be able to settle, for example, Katana instances or Madara instances to Starknet and verify them there, and unlock these additional affordances. I think there's a lot of tooling and infrastructure that we're building. We've been building Dojo for a little bit over a year now, and have made significant progress. We've been running game jams every few months, and the types of games that people have been able to produce every single 2 months is significantly better than what we've seen previously. And we think that we're just getting started. There's a lot more low-hanging fruit. And so I think there's a lot of improvements in the toolchain to provide game developers similar leverage to what you see from a DeFi developer, where they can build very interesting experiences very rapidly and put them on chain, and enable them to do a lot of experimentation. We've already seen quite successful on-chain gaming ecosystems, for example, Realms, where it's a very active DAO with a lot of resources and a bunch of teams building on top of them. I think there's a lot of interesting experiments there that we're going to be able to bring on chain. Almost all of them today exist, as play testing deployments, and so they're not fully on chain. They don't actually take advantage of incentives and stuff like that. They're not fully taking advantages of the affordances of the blockchain, obviously. I think once we can put those on chain, we're going to be much closer towards finding the answer to that question. So I think we're close. I think it just takes a little bit of time. We need to improve the tooling and the infrastructure a little bit, but like, I think we're really close to what we need to build these actual, very complex, immersive experiences on chain.
I guess then 2024 will be an exciting year for
it's going to.
games. Okay. This question is for Abdel. As you now move to your new role as ecosystem lead, and the Starknet ecosystem have been growing. When the ecosystem is smaller, it's easier to have everyone in harmony. But as the ecosystem grow, how do you balance competition and also, at the same time, the feeling as a family?
That's a very good question. And it's hard to scale this, to be honest, yes, for sure. And on the same time, you still need to keep some credible neutrality of the important players of the protocol, so namely like StarkWare, all the important partners, the foundation, and whatnot. So it's important that we both support the growth of the ecosystem, but without hurting the neutrality of the protocol and the governance of the protocol. So it's not an easy problem. So I think that overall, like competition is healthy overall, and it's good for the ecosystem to have some competition, because competition means also resilience of the ecosystem, because if there is some project that has some issues and need to shut down, we want multiple other projects that can continue to deliver the same features and services. But yeah, this is something that is hard to scale, so we still need to figure out how we will manage that. And ideally, we all want to preserve also this shared identity of the community. Ultimately, the social layer is what is the most important for any blockchain, to be honest. And we already see that this is something that is very strong and unique to Starknet, like this very strong social layer that you see nowhere else in the L2 space. Like, and part of that was also because of the technical stack, like the fact that Cairo is not EVM compatible and so on. But yeah, we need to preserve this culture and try to spread it as much as we can, but still being like permissionless and stimulate competition and being neutral as much as we can.
Interesting. I think this question also is for Tarrence, because you are also building the gaming ecosystem, and I guess at some point you might also start to have this kind of conflict.
I think the way to scale culture is through memes, and I think Abdel does a really great job of that.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. Okay, I think we have just the last few seconds. Maybe we can have anyone who have any questions for Abdel or Tarrence about Madara, Dojo, or Starknet ecosystem. Yes?
What current live app chain projects are you most excited about in Starknet?
Currently, there is no Starknet app chain as layer 3. So there is one Starknet app chain in production that is a perpetual exchange named Paradex. Yeah, Paradex. So this is the only one that is live. Because there are also StarkX products, but those are not Starknet app chain. So the only one in production is Paradex today. We did not mention it, but we still have some missing pieces to bring layer 3s to reality on the technical front, and we are working together also with Cartridge team to make this a reality, and Herodotus as well, because they are building the Cairo verifier that is needed to verify the proofs submitted by layer 3s. But as Tarrence said, like in the next 6 months, this will become a reality, and then we'll see what kind of options we will have. But yeah.
Where are game assets going to live? Are they going to live on layer 3s, or are they going to live on Starknet or Ethereum?
Sorry, I missed the question.
Where are game assets going to live?
Maybe this one's
I think game assets is a very broad set of items. I think it depends a lot on the type of asset. Like I think like some things require more security than others and should be potentially L1 native assets and inherit the full security of a rollup on top of the Ethereum, and some of them can be L2 native, some of them can be L3 native, some of them might be stored, use Volition to be stored on alternative data availability solutions. I think an asset is really just any state that's owned on a blockchain, and I think it'll exist across this entire spectrum.
Okay, no more questions. Then I would like to thank Abdel and Tarrence for sharing so many deep insights.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to StarkNet in 2024.
Thank you.